This morning, a friend of mine is sending me this text message. Okay, it's about an article on data centers. It shows a dirty glass of water and it says in the title, "Woman says Zuckerberg's AI data center filled her tap water with sediment." And I had to kind of think about it and wait, is that how data centers really work? My engineering mind really didn't really agree with that. So I thought, you know what, I'm just going to be unbiased and I'll try to dive into this and really understand it. If you spend any time online, you have seen the warnings, okay? I'm sure you've seen it. And panic, and probably the photos like this one as well. AI data centers, we are told, are draining the rivers and even poisoning the water supply. It is a scary story, no question. So I did something very simple. I did some digging. And I went and read the actual reports and the studies, the government data, the peer-reviewed studies, the fact checks, all that kind of jazz. And the real picture is a lot more interesting than the panic, in my opinion. So let me walk you through it. So the first thing that you need to understand is this is really two separate questions and they do not get the same answer. Are data centers destroying water sources and wrecking aquifers for good? No. And are they putting real strain on the water in certain towns and areas? Yes, absolutely. And almost every headline smashes those two together and treats them as one. But keep them apart and the whole thing gets much more clearer. So let us start with the big national number. The Department of Energy's Berkeley lab, the most authoritative source we have right now, and granted, this is still developing, obviously. The AI data center play is relatively new, so I'm sure there will be more research done. But they have found that every data center in the country combined uses about 17.5 billion gallons of water every year. Hold on to that number for a minute, because in a second, I'm going to show you why a number that big can still be misleading. And here's the trick that trips up almost everyone, including a lot of journalists. There are two completely different ways to measure water use. The first is called withdrawal. That is how much water you pull out of the river or the ground or whatever your resource is. But a lot of that water goes right back, often perfectly clean, just a little bit warmer. And in the second, that is that water that does not come back. It evaporates. It is gone from that community for a long, long time, and it's hard to, replenish that. So consumption is the one that actually matters because that is the water a place truly loses. And here is the catch with the scary headlines. A power plant withdraws a staggering amount of water, but it returns almost all of it. So that giant number makes it look far worse than it really is. Data centers are the opposite. They withdraw fairly little, but they evaporate most of what they take. So on that number that actually counts, they punch well above their weight. The lesson here is simple though. When someone shows you a huge withdrawal figure, do not panic. Ask the real question. How much of it goes into the air and how much of it goes back where it came from? How much of it is gone for good, right? That's a difference here. So consumption is the number that we care about in this case. So how does a data center stack up against everything else that uses water, I ask myself. This is the context that almost never makes the headlines because it's boring, right? And AI is the thing that everybody loves to talk about. But let's look at American farms. They use about 42% of the country's fresh water. 42%, almost half of it. Every data center in the nation combined, and granted, I know the number is growing, but currently combined on site, it's only about point. That is not a typo. That is next to agriculture. That data center use is a teaspoon next to a swimming pool, okay? But there is a second hidden water number, and almost nobody talks about that either. It is not the water at the data center. It is the water evaporated way upstream at the power plant making electricity that data centers run on. And that indirect water can actually be larger than the cooling water on site by itself, which leads to a surprising conclusion. The single biggest thing driving a data center's water footprint often is not the building itself. It's whichever power grid the AI data center plugs into. So if you have a power grid that is run by water and that evaporates into steam to power an engine, then that's the biggest footprint of a data center that's indirect. Nationally, it is a rounding error. But here is where worry becomes very real. Locally, it can be enormous. Take a place called the Dalles in Oregon. It is a small, tiny city, and Google's data center there now uses roughly 40% of the entire town's water. 40% for one company. The water supply does not care that data centers are tiny nationally. Okay, that town this is a serious problem for them. So put it all together and you get the honest shape of the story, in my opinion. It is not destruction, but it is a real local burden. This is a problem about where we build these things and how we cool them specifically. It is, and also how we power them, if you want to be honest with yourself. It's the same for cars, electric cars, by the way. It is not the end of the region's water necessarily. And those are two very different problems that call for very different responses. Now let us take the strongest version of the fear. Actual destruction, aquifer collapses, supplies ruined for good. I went looking for studies that prove this. And the largest groundwater survey ever done examined 170,000 wells around the world. And it points the finger at irrigation, at farming. Not one peer-reviewed study names data centers as the primary cause of an aquifer collapsing. And that missing study, that absence of evidence in itself is kind of the finding. And again, there's a caveat because times are changing and we're getting more data centers online, but there's nothing that we can point to yet. And then there is pollution. You remember the photo that I showed you? The brown dirty water in that photo? People keep sending me these things and I see them all over the media all the time. Some of these are real. There's a story that came out of Georgia from families living near Meta's data center. But here's the nuance that really matters. The trouble started during construction, the digging and the drilling, not the cooling of the actual data center. And so far, no lab analysis has actually confirmed that the data center as maybe the cause. It is a genuine problem for those families. I'm not doubting that at all. But the link is still unproven. And then there is the other half of those photos, the one that are simply fake. Yes, talking about AI and deepfakes and all that type of stuff. Those water towers stamped, you might have seen it, they stamped those slogans that say, you can't drink data, right? They are AI generated. Snopes rated them false. The viral claim that Mark Zuckerberg dried up the Rio Grande, all false. So we have a whole layer of AI generated propaganda and maybe otherwise generated propaganda as well, riding right on top of people's real, genuine concerns. And even the single most famous statistic here is wrong. You have probably heard of ChatGPT drinking a full bottle of water, 500 milliliters in that case. And even Sam Altman said that every time you say please and thank you, you should consider that you're using extra water if you do that. So don't do that, but I still do it. But the actual research puts it closer to 17 milliliters per response. The headline was way off. And one last one. You will hear the big tech companies promise to be water positive by 2030, putting back more water than they use. It sounds great, but the independent reviewers who actually dug into the data say that the math is not mathing. Consumption is rising faster than they are replenishing, and the accounting quietly leaves out most of the footprint that we discussed previously. So here's what I want you to walk away with for this video. The next time a scary water headline hits your feed, you can size it up in about 10 seconds. Just ask yourself 4 questions. Is it withdrawal or consumption that we're talking about here? Is it the water on site or the hidden bigger water back at the power plant, right? Is it a local number or are we talking nationally? And if it is a photo, that the troubles start at the construction or with the cooling? And is the image even real, right? Get those 4 answers right, and the panic turns back into what it really is. A real, specific, solvable problem about a handful of towns and a handful of cooling towers. Not the end of the world's water. I broke down all of these 5 towns, every single source of what I was talking about in today's edition on the AI Adopters Club, and the link is right below this video. I hope this was helpful. Click the link below. Give me a like and a follow if you want, and pass it to anybody who's worried about AI data centers so they can be a little bit better informed. Adapt and create, and I'll see you in the next one.